Jonathan Spears, who is visiting with us from Compass 30A. Jonathan, thanks for joining us today.
My man, thanks for having me. Glad to be here, broadcasting from the white sand beaches of 30A.
The beautiful white sand beaches of 30A. I love it. Well, man, we'll jump in. I really want to introduce you to the world, and for those who don't know you yet. And I'll share just briefly. I said this to you offline. I became aware of Jonathan Spears on a vacation trip to 30A. Being from Texas, everybody in Texas loves to visit to 30A for those white sand beaches. And I saw Jonathan's signs everywhere. And so gave him a follow on social media. And, it's been about a year and a half now. And here we are. So, Jonathan, we want to jump in, and I would love to just get you to share your story kind of with the world. But specifically, would you just jump in, and we're going to do a little icebreaker question here. I would love to hear a story. You've been doing this a while. We've all had crazy transactions. We've had weird things happen. I would love to hear share with us a story of something just super crazy that happened either in a transaction or with a client that you don't get a chance to tell the story often enough, but another agent might appreciate.
Who you put me on the spot? I've had quite a few. Man, dude, some of the weirdest in Florida is when you have to sign mold disclosures to go into a property. So it's like, you're setting yourself up for a nightmare. When I first started my career, I sold foreclosures primarily. So, I feel like the old guy now. At 32, I've got a team of almost 20 individuals. A lot of them are younger than me. I got started in this business at the ripe age of 18. And I remember one of my first showings at a foreclosure property. I was walking a family through a house, and their kids were with them. And we hadn't even made it to the front door. And there was this puddle in the yard, and this kid goes to jump in the puddle, probably 6 feet away from his dad. He goes to jump in this puddle, and he disappears. Like, completely disappears. I'd never been to this house before. I certainly hadn't checked any puddles to make sure that they weren't holes in the ground. And dude, this dad sprung into action, pulled the kid out, came out by his foot, but it was like a pipe that was in the ground that literally just looked like a normal puddle. And so I think the kid learned not to jump in random puddles, and I learned to, try to keep people out of the water. So
did they would say, buy the house?
I don't remember. That
That's
was
awesome.
it was $2.5 billion in sales ago.
Yeah.
But man, they were a sweet couple, and I'm glad there's no harm done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's a good
That was
segue.
a weird one though.
Yeah, no, that definitely would be tops for me. It's a good segue. So I did not know this about you, but I did want to ask you, how did you get into the real estate business? So at the ripe age 18, I thought I was young getting into the business at 24 years old. So talk to me about getting into the business at 18. What led you into real estate?
Man, like most of us in real estate, we're probably a bunch of overachievers. And I just started overachieving a little earlier than most. At 14, I started college full time. And the first great cold call I ever made was to the dean of our local community college, convincing them that I was mature enough to start college courses 2 years earlier than most people are allowed to be. So started college at 14. I had my first college degree at 16. Went off to Florida State because my mom was dropping me off at school, and finally got a driver's license and branched out a little bit. But went off to Florida State, got my second degree. Simultaneously, I got my real estate license, and this was in 2010. So if anybody remembers the BP oil spill, which occurred in May of 2010, I got my real estate license in February of 2010. So right before, so the world had already crashed. We had just gone through the Great Recession. I got a front row seat because I was studying finance and economics. In my world, I thought I was going to go off to Harvard, or Wharton or maybe a prestigious Ivy League business school. But what was happening is that basically the US financial system had almost crashed. The global economy had almost crashed. And a lot of companies were just surviving. The iPhone was still relatively new when I got into real estate. It wasn't widely adopted. We were still running off of listed MLSs. And a lot of the signature blocks that I had to get on contracts were wet ink only. So DocuSign was not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me feel like a grandpa and a dinosaur today because all the kids in my office run around and, technology is such a game changer. But I got into this business thinking that it was just an opportunity to be entrepreneurial. And I'm still in this business because it's an opportunity to be entrepreneurial. And I just love it.
Man, that's awesome. Okay. So walk me through that. You're getting a college degree starting at 14, which how does that, I don't know how that works. We could have that discussion offline, but that's awesome. You are a wonderkind. Yeah, talk to me.
Well, I got the nickname Doogie Howser when I was in school, and old Doogie, he was a vibe. I did not know who that was when people started calling me Doogie Howser. I had to get on YouTube, which was an emerging market at the time.
No doubt.
And so learned all about Neil Patrick Harris. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll be Doogie. But that name stuck with me throughout my entire college years. Most of the time, people thought that I was like the teacher's kid who was homesick and just needed to hang out in class. And I milked that for a little while until, I just kept coming each week and people realized that I was not the teacher's kid. But I started college mainly because I was very outgoing and outspoken, and I didn't necessarily get along with kids my age. So going off to high school probably wouldn't have been the best environment for me. And my parents thought about homeschooling me, but I was way too rambunctious and I don't want to say unruly, but I did move out of my house just as quickly as I possibly could. But very independent thinker, had to have things my way. And thankfully I had a mom who loved me to death and committed to taking me to school multiple times a week, dropping me off, picking me up. I mean, dude, shout out to mom, because without her, I would have never done that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think in some ways I'm thinking about the life of a real estate agent, and you're a party of one and a lot of times. So you got started in that at a super young age. So what introduced you to real estate then? So you're taking finance economics classes. You're kind of putting skins on the wall with grades, obviously. I joke sometimes, I've got 2 college degrees as well, and I do a job you don't need a high school diploma for. So what then prompted you then to go, all right, I'm gonna hard left here, and I'm gonna get into real estate. Who approached you with that? How did it get on your radar? I'm super curious about like that. I feel like that's a interesting transition.
That's a great question. So at the time, my parents were selling their house. And they go, Jonathan, if you get a real estate license, I bet you we could collect a referral fee. And I was like, a referral fee? What's that? And, quickly learned what referral fees were. And I am fairly economically motivated. I was the kid that would steal Coca-Colas and Fantas and whatever my parents had that was in their refrigerator that doesn't exist in mine today. And I would sell it to all the construction workers that would be working out in the, neighborhoods in Florida during the summer, or to neighbors or whoever I could convince that they needed to spend $1 on the soda my parents bought. So, when my parents talked to me about this real estate opportunity, I was like, okay, that sounds fun. I'll get a license. And frankly, I like to compete with myself. So, the reason I started college early and the reason that I graduated summa cum laude was because I knew I could do it, and I just had to prove to myself I could. And, I've never really stopped having that drive. So obtaining my real estate license, I was able to help facilitate a sale on one of my parents' properties. And then that was about it. And then I realized after that I had to either go out and get a job in the real world, which there was a recruiter that came into Florida State in my final year of college, and he said, "Hey, there's this really awesome opportunity. You can make up to $35,000 a year working as an accountant with your brand spanking new bachelor's degree from FSU." And I thought, kill me now. I can't do that.
It's awesome.
Like, I was like, absolutely not. And $35,000, like, what's that going to get me? So I felt very anti, corporate, which is also why I didn't go off and get my MBA. Although sometimes I dream about jumping into a Harvard business class, although I think I'd rather do it on the teaching end than the receiving end, but I'm a big collaborator, so I like both. But yeah, man, that's ultimately what drove me to get into real estate. Is we were in the middle of an economic turmoil, so there was very few jobs. I also want to get into international business. That door got closed on me because of just the market environment in general. And so I decided to start with what I thought would be the lowest hanging fruit and go from there. And I really found an incredible business where sky's the limit in terms of earnings. It is a bedrock of education. Truly, economic principles, entrepreneurial principles, and just life skills are developed in this business. And when you can adopt a marathon mindset and you approach it as a professional, I really think that there's, a lot to be gleaned from. So really proud of the path that I took.
That's so cool. All right. So you're 18, you get your license, you help facilitate the sale of your parents' house. Where do you hang your license next? Like, you decide, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a career out of it. Where are you hanging your license? You mentioned you did a lot of foreclosures, which there were ample foreclosures back then. Like, where's your starting place? Are you jumping into a team? Are you going solo? Like, how did you cut your teeth?
Yeah. So February of 2010, I got my license, and I spent probably 4 or 5 months figuring out exactly what I was going to do. So I ended up getting a job so I turned 18 late January of 2010, got my license in February. So the day of my 18th birthday, I spent doing licensing work. And
you're different, bro. You're different.
Yeah, dude. I I love it though.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So that summer, June of 2010, right after the BP oil spill in May, I started doing broker price opinions for $400 a week. I worked probably 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can do the math. I maybe got $3 an hour for all of my work. But I was literally being paid to get a world-class education in life and how businesses operate and really truly understanding our business. And what so many people that are listening to this podcast today can relate to is that real estate is really a game of time. And the best agents in the world are the ones that have figured out how to maximize the time that they put in. And they typically do that through systems and processes and organization. And then most real estate agents treat our business like a hobby where they work maybe sometimes and they don't work all the time and they don't have set hours and they really get into it for flexibility. They don't want to be managed. But ultimately, I was really good at managing myself and, very much a self-starter and wanted to optimize every minute of the day. And so doing broker price opinions, I knew wasn't my highest and best calling. And I did that for almost a year and a half before I ever actually sold anything.
How hard is it as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old to get obviously your peers aren't buying houses, so your parents, friends, your friends' parents to trust you with the sale of a house like that? Talk to me about that first, let's call it 5 or 6 years where you're a young pup, Doogie Howser selling real estate. And the challenge of having to overcome that objection.
Dude, get this. So I remember this like it was yesterday. One of the very first times I ever showed somebody a property, they look at me and they go, "Man, where's your parents?" And dude, but my insides were like, like I was screaming. And ultimately I looked back at him and I said, "They're at work. Where are yours?" And dude, this guy was like, "What?" And he's like, "Are you really old enough to be here?" I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "I'm 18. How you doing?" And so,
And
man,
where does this lead come from? Not to cut you off. I'm just curious. Like where
it was a reactive phone call to somebody who inquired on a foreclosure listing.
Okay. Got it.
So it wasn't proactive yet. And we'll talk about reactive versus proactive, but I had reactive opportunities at that BPO job I took, which I was very thankful for. So I show up, I meet these folks. I'm driving my Honda Element. I was looking real fly.
Yep.
And, I was thankful for that car. It got me around. And at some point, $1 Million Listing has started to come out. And this was in the early days where people thought real estate agents were like equivalent to maybe car salesmen. Even myself, I thought pretty lowly of most real estate agents. It was not a highly professionalized profession. And where I found opportunity is in really developing deep relationships with people quickly. So being able to immediately respond to somebody who goes, "Whoa, you look really young," and sharing my story almost like an elevator pitch, not in a salesy way, but more in a way of like, okay, let's talk about me for a second, but then let's talk more about you. And the more comfortable I became just being me, and not being, intimidated by people who are double or triple my age, which actually going to college early was very helpful for, because all of the little teams we had to, coalesce with during business school, most people were a variety of ages. So it could be folks that were coming back and getting their degrees in retirement, or, single moms who were actually, getting through school while having to manage a business and children. And so I got to work with people from all different walks of life. And that was really, a key component of understanding how to collaborate.
That's cool. So you're cutting your teeth on reactive leads. You're kind of getting started. Did you have a mentor at that time? Like, did you have anybody that was kind of your guide in the business?
Yeah, definitely. So the guy that I worked for, he was a top broker in my market. And
by the way, where was your market? Have you always been 30A?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just this corridor. So Northwest Florida. Really back then, I was doing broker price opinions from, and this would be like half of our state, just about, or at least a third of our state, but from Pensacola to Tallahassee, which is that's 2 time zones, multiple counties. There's a pretty big swath of land.
Yeah. No doubt. Okay. And so you did have a mentor during that time.
I did, definitely. Yeah, somebody that knew the business. I think anybody watching this, if you're just getting in real estate, or even if you've been in it for a while and you want to grow, you just don't know where to start, either getting on a team or finding somebody in your office that you can bounce ideas off of or have objective conversations it's a must do. You're not going to grow without surrounding yourselves with people who have already grown and also have a mindset that you want to adopt.
No doubt. So when did things kind of like, when did the scales tip for you? Like you clearly are in a different place now than you were then. What was kind of that tipping point moment for you when you started to like go, okay, all right, I'm finding myself in the business. I'm starting to gain momentum. Like, what was that? What was that for you?
Yeah. It took time. So I would say I didn't really feel any momentum in sales for years. So I spent 2 years working just about, as an assistant, mostly $400 a week, fixed salary, all you can work buffet, with very minimal opportunities to actually sell, until I put myself into a position of saying, look, I'll take your phone calls on the weekends. These are, when I tell you I was working reactively, like we were getting a lot of phone calls on everything from $18,000 mobile homes to maybe a $300,000 house. It certainly wasn't luxury real estate. It wasn't the market that I serve today, but it was a market that was prime to cut your teeth on problem solving. And I think for a lot of the agents out there, when you're not exposed to really complex issues, HUD housing, for example, most agents don't understand FHA or VA. It makes our business seem more intimidating than not. And then, certainly it created more versatility for me in understanding how to overcome objections and just the nuances of the real estate market here on a micro basis.
Okay, talk to me about you've kind of alluded to proactive versus reactive. I'd love to double click on that because I think you and I share some thoughts on that, but I want to hear your kind of what would you say to an agent listening to this that doesn't know what you mean when you say proactive versus reactive? How do you get from reactive to proactive in your business?
This is a really good time to answer your first question that you asked me as well, which is what was sort of that springboard? What was that catalyst? How did you go to the next level? I spent 5 years working in what I call a foreclosure factory before I decided to branch out on my own. So Jonathan M. Spears, independent agent. On the 5th year that I worked in that firm, I had outsold the other agents in that firm. And I think I was 21 and I had done 24 million. I remember it was like I had done a little more than $1 million for every year I had been alive. And that was like on an annualized basis. So I was feeling real good about myself. $20 million back then was like $200 million today.
Yeah,
so
it's unreal. Because homes were worth, you're selling $100,000 properties back then.
I think I did 54 transactions that year. So it was a lot of inventory, a lot of movement, especially for a 20-year-old. But I was hungry for more. I certainly wasn't satisfied. I didn't look at that like it was anything special. I was really figuring out how can I shift my mindset to gravitate towards the parts of the market that I loved. And the first things that I did was I proactively got up every day and I focused on the habits that would lead to success. And I didn't know it at the time. Like I didn't really understand that was a system per se that worked well for me, because all of us that are listening today are going to have a system of operation, especially if you do anything successfully that works for you. I would get up and I'd look at the hot sheet from top to bottom because I was most interested in what was happening at the top end of the market. I served maybe the middle end to the bottom end and maybe the stray occasion that I was at the top end. Great. But for the most part, our REO market was maybe the luxury side was $500,000, which today you couldn't buy a home in my market for $500,000. So it was just interesting to kind of see. But as I gravitated from top to bottom, I learned the whole market. So I was serving down here, but I was really understanding what was happening up here. And I think for all of our listeners, your ability to articulate the market is your value. It's why people transact. Your understanding of who's trading, why they're trading, when they traded, why did this house sell for more than that house? I really got deep and obsessed. I mean, if at 20 years old, I was working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I just consumed information constantly. I got to know everybody in the neighborhood. To this day, if you drive me up and down 30A and you point out a house, I could tell you the last 5 people who've owned it. So really understanding what's happening in the market is the differentiator. So going from that reactive guy that was reacting to these opportunities at this segment of the market to the proactive guy who figured, okay, could I go and leverage myself up here? And how can I make myself valuable to either the investors in the market or, the home builders in the market or, the trophy home owners in the market? That was a task that I had to figure out at that transitional piece. And a lot of it was shifting from waiting for my phone to ring to picking up and making the calls in the areas of the market that I knew that I wanted to serve.
So you're picking up the phone. Who are you calling? Like you made a leap. I mean, you made a big leap, and a lot of people want to go from average price point in the bottom third to average price point in the top third.
Absolutely.
You did that successfully. I've seen, a lot of people do that gradually where it's just kind of, their people stair step over time. It seems like you kind of it was probably gradual, but it seems like you made some moves to do that. So you said you're picking up the phone and calling. Who are you calling? Like, where did you intuitively know like how to make that move?
I would say it was obsessive. I obsessed over the top end of the market. I knew all the stats, like, some of our listeners know NBA player stats. Like I knew what the agents were selling. I knew the average sales prices. I know who was at the top of the market. And for me, I just really focused on the inventory that excited me and I could articulate it extraordinarily well. And so I'll tell you, one of my favorite cold calls was to one of my business partners that I work with today. And I made this call probably 11 years ago. And I pick up the phone, I call him and I just said, hey, I just walked a house that you're building on XYZ Street. I'm blown away. Like nobody's ever done this here before. What made you do this? And this guy was like, huh? Like who's this? And he let's just say you guys have a builder in your market that does extraordinary work. They love to talk about it. They're going to share it with you. He didn't know me at all. He certainly didn't know I was only like 19 or 20. Because I got my deep voice on and I was, trying to be a big shot. And what was cool was by the end of that conversation, I just said, hey, if I could bring a buyer to this, what's your number? He gave me some crazy number. And, within like 2 weeks, I just went out and I got one half of the puzzle and I said, darn it, I've got to put this whole thing together. So I started picking up the phone, calling agents, knocking down doors, figuring out how do I get the other piece of this puzzle? I had no private exclusive. I had nothing. I had a commission agreement for 4%, which, it was a $3+ million deal. And that's life changing for a lot of people. I mean, it's $120,000 if you're getting 3%. So I ended up double ending. I brought him a billionaire client out of Nashville, which I was real lucky to have found.
How did you find that person?
By bringing somebody that I knew could afford the house, something of value, which was a home that really nobody else had seen in our market. It was a pretty extraordinary property. And just being able to put the two together. And I realized very quickly, like our calling is not only to be advisors, but really to be matchmakers. And so I was able to matchmake, won the opportunity to serve this developer who really was the biggest developer in our market then and is still the biggest developer in our market today. We grew together. Now he and I build $20 million houses.
That's awesome.
And so that all started with a cold call.
Hey y'all, Ryan and Collin here. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you have gotten any value from the show, and if you resonate with our thoughts on how we serve clients and happen to have a client moving to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we would love to serve them. Our promise to you is that we will take exceptional care of every single person that you send our way, that we will collaborate with you every step of the process to make sure that it is a seamless experience for everybody involved. And we're going to offer you a generous referral fee as a thank you for trusting us with that relationship. Now, you can connect with us through our social channels, or you can go to our website, all of which are linked in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you a ton. Now back to the show. Okay, so I'm gonna push on you a little bit here, just because you're 21 years old, and I don't have a whole lot of billionaires in my Rolodex today. I definitely didn't when I was 21, and I know that you brought him a beautiful house. But where did you find this guy? Right? You just you hobnobbing at the beach and you found him, or?
So what's interesting is he was not a billionaire at the time. He ended up selling his company for $1 billion. Like 6 years ago,
okay.
But he was still extraordinarily wealthy. No, I connected with him through a rental manager that I knew who was also a client of mine. And so those two had been business partners. And I knew from this rental manager that guy was open to buying something special. They had had a recapitalization of their company. Here, this is a trick for everybody listening. Pay attention to life events.
Yep.
Understand the people that buy and sell in your market. When they sell a company or they recapitalize, or you see them in the news for some type of new product that they've sold, or they just had an IPO, pay attention. In fact, obsess over those things and understand that when money moves, it's going to move in your direction if you're the one who can provide value to that individual. I didn't call this guy up and go, hey, I know you're worth X number of dollars. I've got a great property for you. All I did was share it with his friend. And I said, look, I came across something really spectacular. Would you be willing to show your buddy this property? And all I ask is if he responds positively to it, you would connect us. And boom, he responded positively. It was very low pressure. It wasn't, salesy. The guy called me. What's up with that? Who are you? Quick elevator pitch is who I am. But let me just tell you more about the product. And more importantly, are you going to be in town anytime soon? Let's go see it. Like, no big deal. And so that's how we were able to solidify that relationship.
A couple of things I'm going to highlight just for those listening that I love that you've said. One is you provided something of value. There was no sales pitch there. It's like, this is a beautiful thing. Do you like it? Would you want it? Come take a look. That's it. I'm just putting it in front of you. I'll show it to you if you want to. It's not like work with me because I graduated high school at 14 and got a degree at 6. You know what I mean? There wasn't any of that. And then on the listing side, you basically called up the builder and just said, hey, I'm just noticing that you're doing something spectacular. And I think that's, you were developing a relationship. Like you had an instinct even at that age to develop the relationship before you go in for the ask. I think that's awesome. Where does the intuition for that? I mean, a lot of people are book smart, but they're not street smart or relationship smart. Where does the intuition for that come from?
That's funny you mentioned that, because when I tell people I went to college at 14, they're like, oh my God, you must be a brainiac. And I'm like, really? I was like a C student in middle school. So there was nothing statistically that would have ever said that I would go to college early. I just was really stubborn and I had to get my way, and I had to rebel against something, and I just happened to rebel against the normal school system. But yeah, I mean, just going back to that sort of mentality of, being willing to put yourself out there and be authentic. I think authenticity is what drove me to that point, and just knowing that, hey, I can articulate this great product and I'm excited about it. And ultimately I believe in it.
Man, that's awesome. You're a learner, clearly. I am curious where these days, I guess you're 14 years into the business. Where do you do your learning now? I mean, obviously you study the market, you're an expert in your market, but outside of that, what are you listening to? Where do you draw inspiration from? Like where do you like to tap in for kind of your learning?
It's funny. I think LeBron James loves to remind people that he's more than an athlete. And I think it's brilliant, because as real estate agents, a lot of times we want to like put ourselves into this box and say, I am a real estate agent. And for me, real estate is an artistic expression of the entrepreneur that's inside of me. And so when I look at the landscape of learning, I mean, my favorite things to learn, I love the tech industry. I love healthcare. I obsess, like I listen to the All In podcast. I love it.
Love it.
I love, the How It's Built podcast. I love founders. I probably listen to every founders episode. There's like 300 podcasts. So I consume a lot of data through podcasts. I love, the non-traditional media sources. I'm reading, books about health, and I love to take in sort of the medical industry and understanding what's happening in our world and the advances in science and, how we can all get better. So I'm a big believer in betterment. I've had an interesting like weight loss journey and just trying to figure out my own health and, how can I be high stressed and also be highly productive in health and family and wellness. And, the two don't necessarily get along. So how do I be a better father? How do I be a better husband? How can I, dig deeper in my relationship with God and, focusing on spirituality? And so all those things are really important to me. So I say all that because when we think about real estate, we're always students of the market. The way that you stay sharp is being in the market. So yeah, I mean, I'm in the market, I'm after it, but I'm also really focused on other areas and other things to sharpen my skills.
How do you, I love everything you just said. I'm curious because I think people would assume they look at you, they look at your business. You mentioned early on you're working 7 days a week. Sounds like that's not necessarily the case anymore, that you found some semblance of balance. I think people assume, and I hear this a lot from young agents, like, I don't know if I want to do more business because at some point, like I'm just working all the time. How do you how would you articulate the ways that you find to fill your cup in all of those different areas and still be successful in business? You've talked about health and wellness. You talked about your faith, family, and you're here selling, a lot of real estate every year. How would you talk to somebody who's maybe a younger agent in the business about that?
Ryan, you're going to let me preach, right?
Preach, man. Hey, you can preach. I'm good.
I would say this. We all have finite time. We roughly get 4,000 weeks out of the year. That's a 76.9 year lifespan. There's also a great book about 4,000 weeks, but we get about 4,000 weeks, and how we spend them is so important, because the same amount of time that the CEO of Walmart has to run one of the most brilliant American-grown companies on the planet, it's the same amount of time that I have, Jonathan Spears, to run my real estate team and a handful of other businesses. And so what I realized at a fairly early age, I was expecting my first child, which is my daughter Ella. It's 2017. Was that I could not do it all. So there's a great book called Who Not How. I did not read that book at this time, but I adopted that mindset very quickly, is that I need to come alongside wonderful people to achieve my dreams, because I cannot do it all by myself. So the very first thing that I would do if you're listening to this podcast and you've not read Who Not How is go and read that book and soak in the fact that you don't have to do everything. That if you are a micromanager, that is your kryptonite, and you need to let that go immediately. So for me, especially, I wanted to do everything. I was just so particular and so focused on perfection. If I was going to release a video on social media, it better be filmed by Steven Spielberg, because nothing else would do. And then I realized very quickly that if I wasn't good at delegating and good at articulating my vision and, understanding that there's other people who are more talented than me at other areas of my business and of life, that I would fail, because I couldn't be a great family man. I couldn't be, a great husband, a good friend, a good brother, just all these other areas outside of our business that are really tangibly more important than these 8-hour work days that we all achieve to maximize. I wasn't going to reach the level of success that I dreamed of. And so today my mindset is really, how do I invest in great people? How can I elevate the people around me? What can I do to edify others? Because really profits become a byproduct of that edification and that value that you add. And so that's what I built my business around. That's what I revolved to. And, man, if there's anybody listening that can relate to just being sort of stuck on a hamster wheel, a lot of the reason we get stuck on a hamster wheel is because we're not willing to delegate, and we're not willing to trust others and find the right people to come alongside us and help us achieve our goals.
So let's get really practical on that point, because I think it's a great one. You now run a team you have 20 agents, is that right?
18 agents.
18 agents. You got a team of 18 agents, which is a big team by any measure. You started out as a solo agent young. Can you walk us through just practically, what did it look step by step to go from solo agent, doing everything yourself? What was the first step you took towards kind of delegating? And then what do things look like today? What's the makeup of your team, both in agents and kind of in-house staff, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So very first step is I was losing business because I couldn't get to it. I wasn't able to maintain as many relationships thoughtfully and consistently as I'd like to. And so I hired an assistant. And that felt really scary, because as soon as I hired that assistant, I remember this day I was sitting in an office and I could hear chickens, balking outside. I'm like, I didn't even know we had chickens on 30A. What is this? I'm just used to being on the phone all the time. What's going on? Why is my phone not ringing? And I realized it's because in the MLS, all of my listings now routed to my assistant. And I said, what am I going to do with all this extra time? I just like being busy. And that was a really big lesson that busyness does not equal productivity.
So good.
I'm going to say that again. Busyness does not equal productivity. A lot of us stay busy because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we're accomplishing something. But the reality is if you don't audit that busyness, you're not going to accomplish the things that you think you are. And so in that sort of void of space, I was forced to figure out how to be productive. And if any of you guys struggle with anxiety, my anxiety is not being productive. I could be in the middle of a conversation, and if I feel like it's going a gossipy direction or a non-productive direction, you will watch me turn around and walk away. Like I can't. Like it just drives me absolutely crazy. So that was my first step, hire an assistant, and then figure out how do I productively add to the extra time that I'm buying back. So the only reason that you work with other people is because you realize very quickly in order to accomplish your goals, you need other people that have skill sets that complement yours. Well, my assistant complemented me from an organizational standpoint. And I really learned the value that keeping everything up here is not a wise thing to do. And so I had to figure out how do I extract this, and then how do I create a system and process along with this very process-oriented individual to execute on the business goals that we have. And then as we started to do that, we realized, okay, we're both starting to get really busy. What do we need next? And then what I decided was I needed to hire other agents to come on and sort of take a workload off of me that I couldn't necessarily get to, or maybe it wasn't the best use of my time, as I was trying to identify how do I elevate my highest average price point. So ended up hiring agents, and that slowly grew into what Spears Group is today, which is much more of a well-oiled machine. We've got not only executive assistants, we've got a marketing director, COO, I've got a media team, and then we get to serve 18 incredible agents. And our goal with our agents is ultimately just to create a brand and platform that when they use the Spears Group name, it's going to open a door and open an opportunity to create a relationship that could change their life. And ultimately, we also want that ability for those guys to step into that door and to help the client on the other end achieve the same goals and the same dreams, the same satisfaction.
Wow, that's awesome. So you make your first hire, you hire an assistant. If you don't mind sharing, when was that, first of all? At what stage? How many homes are you selling at that time? Because I think a lot of agents are like, okay, I'm terrified that I'm not going to be able to cash my next paycheck, let alone take it on the salary of somebody else. I know I took a long time to get to that place. I probably waited a little bit longer than I needed to. When did you do it, and would you have done it sooner?
Oh my gosh, I would have done everything sooner. I would have done it all sooner, and then I'd be 10 years ahead of where I'm at today. But that's not
no regrets, though. No regrets.
So if I got licensed in 2010 and I started working summer of 2010, I didn't have an assistant until late 2015 into early 2016. And so I spent the first 5 years of my career solo, doing absolutely everything. I did my own postcards. I did, my own graphic design. I did everything. And it was a good experience. And when I brought on my first assistant, man, I clearly remember being sort of like scared with the extra time on my hands. Like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What do I do with this? Because I liked to do everything. I thought it was productive. But ultimately it was just busy work. So, that was 2016 when I brought on an assistant full time.
Man, that's awesome.
You want to know how I realized I needed that?
Yeah, I do.
Is my wife and I got married in 2013, and we didn't take our honeymoon until 2015 because workaholic over here wasn't willing to go.
Thank God for wives who show us the things we need to see.
Yes. Mine's, my wife is German and Japanese, and she's about as organized and as, humbling as they come. She's not afraid to tell you what you want or what you need to hear.
That's awesome. So she was like, Jonathan, you better hire an assistant or else.
She was like, you better hire an assistant. And that was like, yes, ma'am.
That's awesome. Well, way to listen, man. It's worked out for you, okay?
Yes, it has.
Okay, shifting gears, and then we'll wrap up pretty soon. But I want to every agent who's on here has they're going to look at your business and go, well, man, like there's no way I could do that. And every time he swings, he hits it out of the park. Clearly, he's got some secret sauce that I don't have. I would love to hear a story of something that you tried that just felt absolutely flat. Like, do you have any stories of things that were just, you know, you thought this was going to be like the next step, and then all of a sudden you realize it's like a complete dud?
Yeah, I've got a lot. One thing I would say that's really interesting, if you're a team leader that's listening to this, in my career, I've gone through probably 3 or 4 iterations of my team. So imagine we're the Kansas City Chiefs, and today we have Patrick Mahomes, and we have Travis Kelce, and we have Taylor Swift cheering for us up in the stands. That's awesome. But, you know, a few years ago, we didn't. And maybe I was recruiting people to my team that didn't have the same shared vision, but they had production and they were nice. And, you know, I thought that that was a good idea to just bring on wonderful people that, you know, eventually they'll adopt the right vision, right? Wrong. So, you know, I struggled trying to identify who are the right people that belong on a team. And it took me a little while to really approach my team like a Fortune 500 company approaches their organization. And so today, Spears Group has not only a mission statement that every agent is accountable to, we have core values that we're all accountable to and we hire, fire, and evaluate on. And really ultimately trying to set a standard of culture that is more than just me, right? It's not about Jonathan. It's not about me trying to be the center of everything. It's about really fostering an environment that people come in and they're able to collaborate and ultimately change lives.
So if you don't mind me asking, when you hire now, what are you optimizing for? You know, it's hard to hire. Agents, we're a fickle bunch sometimes. Everybody says the right things. Everybody says they want to crush it and take good care of people and be awesome. How then have you shifted in your hiring process now? Like what is it that you optimize for? What do you look for that's made that difference on the team?
So first thing I look for is people that adopt our mission statement, which is creating lifelong relationships and making raving fans. So what I always tell our team is when you're deer in the headlights and you just don't know what to do and everything's out of your control and the Ukraine is launching U.S. rockets at Russia, right? Something you absolutely can't control. What do? You make lifelong relationships and you create raving fans. You go out and you be authentic and you love on people and you get to know them and, you know, you really target a farm market and establish yourself there. Be planted, be rooted. You know, rooted trees, when a hurricane comes, they don't fall down very easy. So I really encourage and look for team members that can get behind that and really understand that that is the core of why we're all here and why we come together to you know, ultimately achieve great things.
So making lifelong relationships, obviously everybody does that a little bit differently. Where do you find yourself? You know, if I think of, I call it my silos of influence, like where I spend my time, where I put my roots deep. For you personally, like where are those places?
I mean, I feel like I focus on being a tastemaker. So I want to spearhead the development quality in our market. A lot of what's coming out of the ground is personal development that we're able to identify the needs of the buyer profiles that we believe will come as a result of building out great inventory. And also for all of us on this call, we have the opportunity to tell the story of our market in a really unique and bespoke way. So we look at ourselves as the tourism authority of 30A. So I challenge everybody, get online right now. Just open up your Google tab, separate of us having this conversation. I want you to type in 30A, Wall Street Journal. And I want to see if you can find an article that the Wall Street Journal's put out that doesn't have my name in it. Or type in 30A Forbes, or type in 30A Rob Report, or just type in 30A and hit news. And tell me if you can find an article that doesn't have Spears Group in it. And the reason I challenge everybody to do that is because our goal has been to tell the story of 30A through every media lens possible and to make sure people understand what the lifestyle is here in this market. And for all of us listening, whether you're, at the level to get a property in the Wall Street Journal or you're just starting your career, you're in such a unique position to tell the story of your market. And trying to leverage a PR source internally, I would highly recommend everybody do, whether it's you sending an email to your local news station. I've been on the local news here multiple times because guess what? I love talking about our market. And so I really love those avenues, and I think that they're very valuable.
That's awesome. Well, man, one more question and then we'll let you go. We're gonna finish every show with the same question, and I have a sense of the direction that you're gonna go with this. But if you could kind of reach back in time and talk to 18-year-old Jonathan Spears, who just got his license and is doing BPOs, and give him some advice, what might you say to your younger self?
What I would really say to that guy is don't sweat the small stuff, and that it's all small stuff. I think a lot of times we get caught up in the drama and, oh my gosh, the fire, and oh my goodness, but the reality is we're not ER workers. We're not working the ambulance. We're here to be focused on creating authentic relationships and truly helping people buy and sell real estate. And so for me at 18, the world was my oyster and I was after everything and I wanted to eat it all and I wanted it all now. But today at 32, going on 33, I'm hyper-focused, I'm simplified, and really, obsessed with building great organization.
Man, that's awesome. That's a good word. Well, man, thank you so much for being with us. For those listening, one of the avenues and the reasons for this show is we want to introduce agents to awesome agents in other markets. You are an awesome agent in a different market, killing it in 30A. Where might people be able to find you? I would love for them to hop online and follow you, but also send all the referrals your way for those trophy homes that you're listing on the Gulf.
You can find me at Jonathan M. Spears on Instagram, at Spears Group, SpearsGroupFL.com. So FL like Florida. Those are the best avenues. Direct message me. I'd love to help, love to connect. And Ryan, the next time you guys are on 30A, let's go. We got to go look at some of those houses.
Let's do it. Yes, let's do it. Well, man, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you. And that's the end of the show.